Hello, my name is Allison Carmen, and welcome to my podcast, 10 Minutes to Less Suffering. Today, the title of my podcast is Don't Worry, Be Hopey. I wish I came up with that phrase myself, but I heard it years ago on a YouTube video by a Buddhist monk named Ajahn Brahm. I imagine when you hear the phrase, Don't worry, be hopey, you might think it sounds like a little gimmicky. But in truth, for me, sometimes trying to stay positive and trying to stay happy when you're going through a difficult time can be very challenging. Yes, there are days where I have happy moments since I've been in quarantine these past 2 months, but then I'll watch the news and I'll hear that 75,000 Americans have died. I hear about people I know that have lost loved ones. And when I hear those things, I don't feel happy. And then there are times when you try to stay positive. And what's so interesting about positive thinking, although I love positive thinking, if you're afraid of uncertainty, if you're afraid of the future, it's really hard to hold positive thoughts. You might wake up in the morning and think things are starting to get better, and then you'll hear bad news. And if you're afraid of what that bad news means for the future, you're going to be battling with negative and positive thoughts all day. And I actually think that positive thinking is also sometimes a need for certainty. I was just speaking to a woman a few weeks ago, and she said, I am a very positive person, but sometimes I use it not to face what's happening. And so I live like in La La Land. Sometimes there's no flexibility with positive thinking. You just have one view of how it's going to be. That's why I love the idea of hope and I love the idea of maybe, because they're not rigid. They don't force us to feel a certain way. They're more open, they're more flowing. And so during this pandemic, yes, you might go in and out of happy and in and out of positive thinking. But hope is really the thing that sustains us. And I know sometimes people say, well, hope is an attachment that leads to suffering because it's a thought that things are going to be one way. But I don't look at hope like that. I think without hope, I'm not going to get out of bed in the morning. Hope is the beginning of every relationship, every new job, every new venture. When I think of hope, I always use the idea of maybe, because maybe reminds us that the unknown, there are possibilities that we hope for. And hope only becomes a problem if you attach to one possibility. Life has to be this way for me to be okay. And the minute we realize that there are possibilities, maybe we don't like, but there are also so many possibilities that we do like, and we recognize there's not one way, it's very easy to hold on to hope. You could be sad and be hopeful. Someone once asked me, could you worry and be hopeful? And I always used to think that worry steals your hope because it makes us so focused on all the bad things that could happen. But when I think about my mother, she does both. She's always worried, but she's always hopeful. So you can do both. I mean, I think that many of us are looking at the fact that worry doesn't serve us. And I know many people feel depleted because they're worried about so many things, but after a while, you realize that it doesn't do you any good. And I know I've brought this up on a prior podcast, but everything that we were worried about 4 months ago, so much of it is no longer relevant. And we don't even know what we should be worried about. We might think we should be worried about the stock market or a job. There are people who were furloughed because their company didn't get the PPP money. And then the next week, their company got the money and they got their job back. I just bring this up to point out that we know worry doesn't serve a purpose, but even if you are worried, hope can still sustain us. Hope is the belief that things can get better. Hope is the belief in new beginnings. And what I also love about hope is that we realize that we don't know. As long as we realize there are many possibilities, it's very easy to sit in hope. It's much easier to sit in hope than it is to sit in happy or even positive thinking. It's just saying that I believe in life. I believe in human beings' ability to find a cure. I believe in kindness. I'm hopeful that we will find our way. It allows us to kind of sit in this vast place where we don't have to know the answer. That's when we get ourselves in trouble, when we search for answers when there are none. And then we start to worry. And we also get ourselves in trouble when we don't allow ourselves to feel what we need to feel. I know I talked about this last time, but that's part of the process. Just because we're worried or sad or unhappy doesn't mean that we're not courageous and resilient. So it's okay to feel everything we're feeling, but it's so important to hold on to the hope. And again, that's why I love the idea of maybe, because it brings you to hope, because you recognize, because you don't know what's going to happen next. That means there are possibilities that you want. That means there are possibilities that you might like. And that's hopeful. And the maybe mindset always brings me there. Because the minute I say, am I absolutely certain my fear is true? Am I absolutely certain my worry is true? You cannot be certain about anything in the future. And then you could ask yourself what's possible. And you start to write the maybe statements down. Maybe everything's okay. Maybe it'll get better. Maybe I need to wait. Maybe I could accept this and still be okay. Maybe there's something for me to experience in this moment. And then you could write more specific statements down that suit your particular situation. And the minute you run through those maybe statements for 5 minutes, for 10 minutes, for 15 minutes, you're going to become Hopey. And you're going to realize uncertainty is your best friend, because if you want your life to change, it has to happen in the unknown. So again, even if you feel worried, let some hope in, let some light in. Because the minute you realize that not knowing means that there are possibilities that we can hope for. And that's the first thing I do when I wake up in the morning. I think about hope. Even if my mind is filled with some concerns or some worries about something I'm working on, or a family member, or the pandemic, whatever is on my mind, I remember that each situation has uncertainty in it. And because it has uncertainty in it, there's maybe. And because there's maybe, there's hope. And the minute I recognize the hope, I feel my heart open. And it's so much easier to stand up when my feet hit the ground. And it's so much easier to face my children and help my children, help my clients, do what I need to do every day. And it's also very helpful to stay present. I think when we don't feel hopeful and we start to feel doomed and we start to feel so much worry, it starts to consume us. And then it's hard to be present and do the work we have to do in the moment. And it's hard to have clarity of thought. And it's hard to enjoy anything in our lives. And I find all that happens is the bad news accumulates on top of each other. And all of a sudden, we are carrying a 50-pound bag on our back. All because we forgot to clear the slate and remind us that our uncertainty is our friend. And until our last breath, we have hope. So I hope you spend some time thinking about this. And I hope you stay open to the unknown and to this idea of maybe. And to the belief that you have hope. That not knowing is hopeful. And that opportunities and possibilities will open up in the days to come. You will figure out your situation if you stay with it. Even through hard times, always hold the hope, because hope is the light that will lead us on the path to new beginnings, to new ideas, to new opportunities, to the end of this pandemic and the start of something new for all of us. And the best thing about hope is that it always reminds us that maybe the best is yet to come. Thank you for listening to this podcast today. If you'd like to get in touch with me, you could email me at allison@allisoncarmen.com. If you'd like to buy my book, The Gift of Maybe, it's available at all major bookstores and online retailers. And if you like this podcast, you could subscribe and leave a comment.